Hi,
Hi,
Rachel.
Mark. Jinx.
How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well, we're
I'm good.
back. This is episode number 10.
Number 10.
And like our last two, we have a sponsor for this one. Very exciting. This is a friend of mine who I have known for a few years. We worked together with our old video surveillance system. I also have had the pleasure of playing golf with this person, and he is a very good golfer. Amongst other, we found some other really interesting things in common. But that being said, tonight's sponsor is Motorola Solutions. And when people hear about Motorola, they often think cell phones or radios and those types of things. But Motorola really has their hands in a lot of different products and a lot of different areas in technology. And to talk about tonight is Ryan Schemmerhorn. And let's bring Ryan out to give a quick little message about Motorola.
All right. And Ryan's on stage now. And for those in the audience who have a plugged-in bingo card at this point, you can mark another square for Mark saying, oh, I played golf with this person. We're going to start keeping a tally. Welcome, Ryan. Hi.
Ryan's a very good golfer.
Mark, I seem to recall everybody contributing and us winning that first tournament together.
That is true. We had a great time.
It was good.
It's nice to have you, Ryan. And before we get into the Motorola stuff, when we were playing golf, this was very fascinating. I grew up in Oregon. I grew up in Newberg, Oregon, as one of our episodes was All Roads Lead to Newberg. Ryan grew up in Beaverton, and you went to Wallowa High School, correct?
Class of 94.
Yep. And I was a class of 92 in Newberg, so we definitely had a little bit of crossover in there somewhere. But my dad was the Newberg High School band director, as we have mentioned a number of times, because we have a fan of the show who is also a past Oregon High School band director. We'll get into that in a minute. But Ryan was an instrumentalist through high school and knew a couple of people that my dad knew and that I ended up knowing, which was actually a really cool connection. And I just loved chatting about that while we were golfing. It was just it was a great way for us to establish a friendship and then a partnership as a vendor and a school district. So thank you for that, Ryan.
So you figured this
fun.
out, like this was your first time kind of spending extended hours together.
Mm-hmm.
Walking
Yep,
across
we rode
grass.
in a golf cart together and we chatted our way through, and he said, I used to play the French horn at Wallowa, and then he named the band director, and I was like, wait, I know that person, because my dad is a lot like me. He knows everybody in that circle. Yeah, it was a very small world kind of thing, and it was an awesome round of golf, and we've known each other since, and it's been awesome.
Well, I think the most important thing we learned that day is that once a band geek, always a band geek, and it's nothing to be ashamed of because it doesn't define you.
That is correct. Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Yes.
So,
Ryan, so glad to meet you this evening and have you with us. Thanks for your sponsorship and time on a Wednesday evening in September.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
So tell us a little bit more about Motorola, which also has a brand name Avigilon attached to it, and I am a very happy Avigilon fan.
Indeed. Mark mentioned cell phones earlier, and that's usually one of the first questions I get. They wonder why I'm carrying an iPhone or something. So just to alleviate that, Motorola used to be in that business. We got out of it a long time ago. You see the Motorola name on the phones out there? We just receive a royalty for the license. But today, Motorola is really corely focused in the safety space. A lot of people, especially in the public sectors, know them for their handheld radios and communication networks. And then just dating back to about 2018, they decided to get more involved in the physical security space with the purchase of Avigilon. And since then, about 20 other acquisitions, including the one that I came with, which is called Ava Security. So without going too deep into that, I'll simply say that my role within the organization today is focused within the 5 Northwest states, including Oregon and Washington. And I represent as a product specialist pretty much the entire cloud platform, which we call Avigilon Alta. Avigilon is really 2 different worlds. It is an on-prem, or what we call an on-premise end-to-end solution, and that's called Unity. And then we do the same thing in the cloud, and that's called Alta. And that's my world. Video surveillance, access control, intercom, intrusion, visitor management, mailroom management, and more and more and more coming. So it just keeps growing.
Yeah, it's a good suite of tools and increasingly important in our buildings.
I met Ryan when he was with Ava because we were getting ready to leave Exact, and he was obviously leaving Exact as well in Ava, and making a really big bid for us to move to a hybrid a hybrid IPVS system. So we actually ended up going that route, and now our Motorola Avigilon customers, which pair nicely with our Avigilon access control. So it's all kind of there.
Yeah, we absolutely don't have time to go in and talk about everything that even we do as Avigilon Alta, let alone, the entire Motorola world. But what I can tell you is that what we found, and I've got the pleasure of working with a lot of different school districts, both public and private, higher ed, and so forth, is that there's a concern today about how to take where they are currently with all the challenges that go along with budgeting and bonds and levies and everything and old technology, and how do we move from that world to something that's relevant today. And what I'm so happy about is that Motorola has made it our mission. Kind of our tagline is solving for safer. And in the physical security space, that really looks like 4 basic steps in any given situation, using the technology to first detect an incident. And that can happen from a video analytic. It can happen from a sensor. Popular sensor option would be maybe vaping in bathrooms. It can happen from a door being propped open or a license plate being recognized. Anyway, that's all detect. We've got a lot of different incidents and a lot of different ways to do that. And then you move to analyze. Is this something critical? Is this something that we need to respond to or not? The next step is, how do we communicate that to the people that need to know, whether it's an automated response, mass notification, verbal cues, automated verbal cues straight to handheld radios on security officers, SROs, on their shirts or on their belts or what have you. And then finally, managing that process, making sure that it comes to fruition and is completely resolved. And when we take a step back and we ignore the basic premise of, look at this widget, look at this cool technology, look what we can do, and you focus on actual outcomes relevant to events that should be on top of mind for any school, it really encompasses the importance and illustrates the importance of having a platform that you don't necessarily need to do everything with a Motorola logo on it, but knowing that you have a platform that can accommodate that and give you an idea of where you are today, where you'd like to go, we found is a very powerful message.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the quick and dirty mile high version. But I have a question for you. Because usually the first thing I get when I'm sitting with somebody new and chatting with them is, well, that's fantastic, but our levies didn't pass, our bonds didn't pass, and we're not in a position to rip everything out. The two of you being in this world every day and chatting with different people throughout the ACPE organization, I have to ask, does that resonate? Is that something that you're
I would like to get levies so that then I can give you a better qualified opinion on this, Ryan.
And I will say that Ryan knows full well that we just wrapped up a massive project in our school district, of which we were only able to do half of our cameras. We actually couldn't afford to do the entire elementary fleet of cameras. We could only do the secondary. So in our next tech levy that we're going out for to the voters in February, we'll cover the elementary half of our cameras, which are still running on the old cameras, but on the new software.
Yeah. So the great part about that is that we're not just trying to show people a bunch of technology and then help them, have them figure out a way to get there. There's a lot of thought that went into how we do what we do, and a major emphasis on making it very, very easy for us to meet you where you're at today while giving you a path to where you want to go. And so one example of that is something that we call our enterprise migration program. This is something, Mark, that your district did take advantage of. And actually, the vast majority of districts I work with all take advantage of this program, which essentially is allowing, on the video side, you to use all the cameras you already have, not asking you to replace a single camera, but through a device called a cloud connector, or a series of them, depending upon the scale necessary, we can take all the cameras that a district already has. We can bring them into the cloud. And more importantly, we can inject all the video analytic intelligence that we have, so that by simply adding this little piece of middleware. Districts get to take advantage of all the relevant technology, all the relevant intelligence, and ultimately set them on a path that is not only predictable, but capable of achieving the ultimate goal, which is similar to what I shared earlier with the whole 4 overall steps. And that's just something that has been really key to the success of our message in this offering. So just to clarify that, we do not ask our customers to go out and replace all their cameras. That does not happen because we know it's just not reality the vast majority of the time. If we can provide a platform that allows districts to move on their own pace, their own schedule, and their own budgets, we found that that's something that provides a value for them.
Exactly.
Ryan, joking about the levies aside, that goes back, across a few episodes before. Those of us, I always say, like, those of us in Oregon are really intrigued by this idea of a levy, and especially those of us who are small enough that can't do like tech bonds and things like that for their districts. So we joke about it. But so what you are saying is what my life is year over year, and budget cycles over budget cycles, planning out 3 and 5 years on rolling averages, and that, like, what can we do this year to leave us a little better off than where we were the year before.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because, you're right. I work with, a couple of very large districts that are coming to me saying our bond didn't pass for the first time ever. And others that say, levies, bonds, what are those? That's not in the cards for us. And, maybe we'll get some of the COPS grant money next year. And there's something else that I recently learned about Motorola that I think is interesting and does actually help address that specific situation. And it's something we call the Municipal Lease Financing Program. And it's something that is internal to Motorola, but it's only available for publicly funded municipal type entities, whether it's cities, counties, public schools, that provides a ton of flexibility, a lot of aggressive rates in there as well. It is financing, so there is interest, but it's significantly lower than what you typically see through traditional avenues. And what I thought was so interesting was the fact that, it can be something that provides, a monthly payment, quarterly, annual. Pick the date that you want to start paying when, make sure that's going to line up with fiscal cycles, things like that. So rather than looking at the burden of a massive overhaul upfront of that capital expenditure, it's something that can often work into a general fund or more of an OpEx budget that is predictable, that allows a district to do what they need to do on, right out of the gate without having to wait and figure out how they're going to make that happen. And there's a lot of creativity and flexibility that we offer in order to make that happen. But that's something I recently learned about. We're always learning something new. And so far, the response to that has been positive as well, because now we've got a solution for those smaller entities that don't have access to things like bonds and levies or things like that, but they still have a solution. They still have an option.
And I know we need to get moving on to our topic tonight, but I do want to take advantage of having Ryan here because our district has been a customer of Ryan's. We did actually finance this project. We didn't do through their program, but we actually did it through our security contractor at NetX. We did finance this to get this project done as quickly as possible, but I want to say one thing in particular about the experience I've had with Motorola. We had a situation this year where our police department said to our HR department, this particular high school with its 200 cameras, we need every bit of video that you have and you have to save it. Now, a lot of you out there know that we had this conversation on the ACPE email list, and everybody who was on Exact said, I just pulled my servers offline and I cold stored them somewhere and I just spun up new ones. Not a big deal. This is not that type of solution. The storage is actually on the cameras. It's a hybrid solution, and you don't just make a copy. So in a very short amount of time, Motorola came up with a mass export tool for us so we could pull the video down. It wasn't perfect, but it was also their first try at this. And they worked with us, they gave us extra storage, and they made sure to get us to a place that met our obligatory needs for this particular investigation. Just kudos to their support. Like, they went above and beyond to make sure that we were okay and that we were able to provide that information to the police if needed. So thank you.
The great part about that is that that whole process that you went through was advantageous for every customer on the platform today, because it wasn't just a one-off. It's now a core feature. So that's the benefit of cloud. You can do something like that and push a button, and now everybody has access to it, right?
Yep. And We use your radios.
And that's a
It's-
perfect segue for
Indeed.
Ryan for us to say thank you, because then we're going to bring on a couple of real radio nerds, said
Yeah,
with fondness
absolutely.
and affection. And,
Thank you so much.
Yes,
and Ryan, we'll
really-
see you at the conference this year for sure. I hope.
100%. We're already reserved our platinum table, so we will
Love
see
it.
you all there.
Love it.
Wonderful. So
Well,
good
thank
to
you
have
very
you
much
with
for
us
your
tonight.
support of the organization. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Thanks a bunch, Ryan.
All right. Bye now.
Well, hi, Mark.
Hi, Rachel.
I'm going to bring our guests on stage because our pop culture, our plugging in is a little bit different this episode. We're going to put you in the hot seat. So before we
Okay.
do that, I am going to introduce Josh Kesecker first. Josh is the CIO at Wallowa County ESD, way up in the beautiful Joseph area in northeastern Oregon, one of my favorite places to visit. And the tram that we went up to the top of the mountain with a few of our CIO colleagues a couple summers ago. And welcome, Josh. We're going to give you and Joe a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit more broadly when we get both of you on here after we get plugged in.
I see
And
what you did
then
there.
Dr. Joe Morelock.
There he is.
Welcome. Dr. Morelock is currently the superintendent. He has to like be an adult in his day job now. I know.
Terrible.
At
Terrible
Willamette ESD. Oh, Mark, this is like an ESD episode. I didn't realize that until I just did the...
It's okay.
Joe, you are currently the superintendent at Willamette. We're going to come back and give you and Josh both some time to introduce yourselves. But first, we're going to put Mark in the hot seat for this episode of Plugged In. We'll put it in the show notes as we drop this episode. But there is a segment that BBC Two does, and it's called Winter Stays. And it's two musicians. You have to only choose one, and then I throw another one in the mix. So I asked Mark for 10 of his favorite groups. I'm
And they were
gonna...
all over the place.
Kind of, but they're also kind of very similar. So anyway, we're going to run through it. And then, Mark, I've thrown in another like 15 of just random best groups lists from different genres. So first one, Def Leppard versus the Supremes.
Oh, Def Leppard.
Def Leppard versus Alanis Morissette.
Def Leppard.
Def Leppard versus Above and Beyond.
Above and Beyond.
Ooh.
That's my answer all the way out.
Above and Beyond is?
Probably. Yeah, just
Oh.
gonna tell you, but continue,
Ooh,
please.
okay, so this is going to get boring. I should have put them towards the end. All right, Above and Beyond versus Beyonce.
Sadly, it's gonna be Above and Beyond.
Above and Beyond versus Willie Nelson.
Don't do it.
I've seen them both live. And I did recently, 2 years ago, see Willie and Family. But I also 2 years ago saw Above and Beyond, and it was amazing. I got to do Above and Beyond.
Okay, Above and Beyond versus Tina Turner.
We're going to go beyond the Thunderdome on this one. It's going to be Above and Beyond. Sorry.
Okay, Above and Beyond versus Bruce Springsteen.
I'm not a big Bruce fan.
Okay,
Just going to be honest.
okay, Above and Beyond versus Beastie Boys.
Oh.
That's a lot of struggle. He was so sure there in the beginning.
Just think of Paul's Boutique. Think of that album, start to finish.
It's such a good album. Is that the Eggman album?
Eggman, yeah.
It's such a good
Johnny
album.
Royale, yeah.
Is that the one that The Move is on too? Which is one of my favorite. I'm going to go with Beastie Boys, honestly.
All right. Okay.
Check your head if you didn't, man. I'll
Ooh.
tell you what.
Okay, Beastie Boys versus the Pretenders. I'll give you a softball.
That would be the Beastie Boys.
Beastie Boys versus Seven Lions.
Ooh. I'm going to go with Beastie Boys. I love Seven Lions. Also from Washington, that DJ.
This is where everybody's going to hold their breath for a minute. Beastie Boys versus Pink Floyd.
That is hard.
Need some Jeopardy music.
Winter
That
stays.
is really hard.
I mean, I wish you were here, Mark. I figured it out.
I know. It's going to be Pink Floyd. I think it's going to be Pink Floyd.
Good call. Okay. Pink Floyd.
Am I influencing these?
No,
I'm not
no.
supposed to be doing that.
Well, I
I'm
was
just,
thinking
you know.
about it, and as you said those things, I'm listening to a song in my head, and it was Pink
Mhm.
Floyd. It was not
Yeah.
Beastie Boys.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Yep. Okay, Pink Floyd versus Queen.
I love Queen is my back, like Fat Bottom Girls is my back pocket karaoke song. But I'm going to have to stick with Pink Floyd, I think.
Okay. Pink Floyd versus The Cure.
It's The Cure.
Gotcha.
It is definitely The Cure.
All right. The Cure versus Cascade. with the K's.
Yep, I love Cascade a lot, but I'm going to have to stick with the classic Cure.
Good call. All right, The Cure versus, this one should be easy, Duran Duran. Oh no, I said it should be easy.
All right, you have to remember that I was a new wave child of the 80s. That was my time. So The Cure and Duran Duran are like soft spots. Like you throw Erasure or New Order or any of those things in there, and that's going to be a problem too. But I am going to stick with The Cure.
Right. Okay, The Cure versus Stevie Wonder.
The Cure.
You're so bad. Who would make that call? And I love The Cure. Okay, The Cure versus Foo Fighters.
If you cannot absolutely respect the musical talent of Dave Grohl, like that man is amazing. But I think I have to stick with The Cure. They just had more of an impact on my adolescent life.
Yep. We've just got two left. The Cure versus Nirvana.
I was never a Nirvana fan.
Okay.
And I work in Olympia.
All right. So the last, and we've ended up with your run here on the end. I'm leaving off some of mine. The last one is The Cure versus Journey. Which winner stays?
All right. It's going to have to be Journey. Because I can go into a bar and I can play Journey on a jukebox and everybody loves it. If I play The Cure, like one head will be going like, oh yeah, cool. So I think it's going to be Journey.
Don't stop believing,
Journey
baby.
is the winner that stays. Thank you for playing along. We'll get back to shows and things like that next episode, everybody. But Mark, there was a very small deviation in the list you gave me.
Oh, yeah. But it was like from EDM to classic rock to, new wave 80s. I don't go into country. I don't do that except for a little
And
bit of
apparently no female rockers.
I guess. Yeah. I never really thought about it.
That's why I had to throw some in.
But Rachel, I do have a TV show because I just started and finished the first episode. Is anybody here watching Alien Earth? Is anybody here part of the Aliens movie franchise fan?
Yes.
From the 80s all the
Yes.
way through all the Alien stuff. Is it FX or Hulu? And I think it might be one of the same, just released a TV series called Alien Earth. And it is through one episode, and I am so flippin' hooked on this show. It is so good.
Writing it down.
And
Alien
it is
Earth.
the whole premise of it is it's the four major companies that the Wayland, there's another H name on there. That's the company that sends the ship out that gets infected by the aliens, the Wayland Hattani or something like that. They're one of the four, and the four of them make four different kinds of either robots, cyborgs, or simulant types of human beings. And it's who is trying to win the market. And they crash an alien onto the Earth. And it is... The first episode's all about Peter Pan, and it is very cool. Like, I've heard that it's good, and I watched an episode on a plane I was on this last weekend, and it was amazing.
Okay, I will
It was
watch it
amazing.
before we talk next time. And
I
if
highly
it's
recommend to everybody. Alien Earth.
Yep, Alien Earth. And if it's half as good as Paradise, then it will be what we talk about for like 6 episodes in a row. Sorry, everybody.
It is just, there's just something about it that it just, like, grabs you. It's so good. So good. Sorry. Had to mention.
Yeah.
But
okay, so Mark, I do want to welcome Josh and Joe and Josh, J and J. I have a book that I bought 4 years ago or so, which is my study guide to do the first radio certification exam, and it's made it to page 20, but I did pull it back off of the bookshelf in honor of this episode. If I were at home, I would put it up in my hands now. I am really interested in all things ham radio, fox hunts, signals, everything, and I know that the two of you are the perfect guests to have. So before we get into the topic, Josh, do you want to take it away first to just tell us a little bit about yourself? Joe and Josh are both fellow ACPE board members, so it's like an ACPE board retreat here that we're having. We might even have a quorum and we could pass some fun things. Yeah.
So moved.
So yes. So Josh, take it away and say hi to all your ACPE friends. And then Joe, we'll just let you jump in when Josh is finished.
Sure.
So, as Rachel said, I am the CIO at Wallowa County ESD. We are a small and rural consortium of schools. And so our schools range from 2 to 400 kids. So there are more cows in this county than students, right? And so all of our schools put together makes us about the size of, Siuslaw or so,
Well done.
where my dancing partner Chris Robotham is. So had to shout out.
Hey, and Joe's on this. We could all do the hustle right now. The
As
seatbelt.
long as you're calling,
And the
I
skate.
might be able to remember.
You got the outfit, man. You got
Oh,
the
it was
outfit.
so good. It was so
I
good.
left that at home.
The greatest outfit maybe ever seen at ACPE.
Yes.
Yeah, that was risque. But anyway, I grew up near Philomath and running all over the valley there and whatnot, and came over here for the job and really liked it. It's pretty, you know. So now they say I can't leave because I've been here too long. So I didn't read that loophole in my contract. But maybe after introductions, we'll talk about how we got started in radio.
Yeah. About
Yeah.
how many years have you been in this seat, in this job, Josh?
21.
I'm doing that same. Yeah. Yeah. Philomath, not too far from Siuslaw. Okay, Joe, take it away.
Chris,
Where there's
Chris-
who's there? Everybody was so impressed with you last time, Mark. Don't kill it.
it'll come to me.
You really do need the Jeopardy theme. You
Robotham.
need the boards.
Robotham, correct.
There you go.
Thank
All
you.
right, Jojo.
Hey, all right. I'm Joe Morelock. I'm the superintendent currently serving at Willamette ESD. I'm in my third year there. I'm in my 30th year in education. So it's been a bit of a travel since I'm still feel like I'm a recovering high school Spanish teacher. So that's actually how I started. And I went from Spanish to librarian for a couple of years and then somehow ended up in charge of tech for nearly a dozen years in Canby. And then assistant superintendent, and I was superintendent in a couple of different school districts as well. So both Newburgh, back to all roads lead to Newburgh, and Woodburn before landing at Willamette ESD.
Joe might even had the pleasure of meeting my parents at some point in time, who are both teachers in Newburgh.
I'm quite sure that I did. We told some stories.
Good.
And
We'll leave
I
those off the podcast, though, because they're
Yes,
probably not
yeah, we'll-
appropriate for most audiences.
yes. And I sit here this evening in Newburgh, Oregon.
You're in Newburgh?
All roads lead to Newburgh.
Go see my parents.
I will go see your parents.
Bring your flugelhorn.
Yes. Okay, so who wants to school me on all the things ham chatter that I am missing in my life? Where do we even start?
Well, I would like to start with kind of how this topic came up. A couple of years ago, Rachel said to the board, there is a person who wants to do a thing at the conference. And that person looks very lost right now. And I don't remember if the original idea was a fox hunt or if it was some other sort of tracking thing, but it's called, Josh calls it the fox hunt. And if you've seen it at the conference, well, I'll let Josh describe how it all works. And that's kind of how this came about.
And actually, that first year was actually the badges.
How this started was I learned about DEF CON and badge life, and I got crazy into the rabbit hole there. But at DEF CON, they had this thing where they do a fox hunt and people actually walk around with the foxes on them and you find somebody, right? And if you find the person, you get to keep the little fox hunt badge. So this is just a little badge, but it was so popular, they made a limited edition rerun. And so I was like, take my money, nice portable little, fox hunt PCB, sign me. And it's pretty too. Like, it's neat, it's cool. And I found myself, ooh, this is fun. And I did some other little project. I'm like, I never thought electronics, soldering and fixing stuff. I always did it to fix something. I never thought it would be fun, but then I did it for fun. And so here we are. Anyway, I'm like, that would totally be something we could do. And in the Discord, there was a couple folks like, it'd be fun if we had a fox hunt someday. I'm like, yeah, it would. And so then I got the badge. I'm like, okay, I have a fox that we need to find, right? And then David at Edmonds, I believe, he's like, I'll make some antenna kits. I'm like, great, that'll be great. So he sent me one to test, and that's still the original there, tape measure antenna. And let me tell you, if you want to get lookers and attention, just walk around with one of those things for a while, like, and people just, what is going on? Because they see the tape measure, but then it's like antenna-like. And anyway, so this broadcasts a little message. I would play it for you now, but I want you to figure out what it is for yourself. Many of you already have. So I came up with locations on the Skamania campus, like we could hide them here, or we could move the badge around each day. It'd be fun. And then people could win these prizes. I'm going to make all these cool little badges that light up, and they just, would be neat. So that was the start of it, and it was pretty popular, you know?
Popular is the right way to say it. So, yes, and I think similar to dancing on the dance floor, some people are hanging around the edges because they don't know how to engage yet.
Well, in the first year or two, it was self-serve kind of a thing. Like, oh, there'll be some ham people. They'll bring their stuff. They'll do the thing. But there were a lot of people are wondering, like, what's it about? How do I do this thing? Or I couldn't find it. So last year I did a guided hunt after dinner one night, and there was like 30 of us. It was a great turnout. We even had a vendor there. They were stoked. And this kind of leads into the why it matters piece. But as we were out there trying to find the thing, we were getting mixed readings. And I had one of my fellas hide it so that I did not know myself where it would be. And so we got readings from one place. It sounds like it's over there. No, it sounds like it's over there. What gives? And we were hearing reflections. And so that caused a teachable moment about Wi-Fi 6 and how it's able to use reflections and things and the non-line of sight stuff and how that applies to our daily lives. And a lot of people are just like, that's awesome. I get it. And that was very fulfilling for me because I see radio, applying to our Wi-Fi, to our buses, to our public safety, all the time. But the concepts behind it are often abstract. And so without application, it goes past a lot of people.
Yeah. So, Mark, you set this up right where Josh was like, I have this idea. And I took it to the board because I want this to happen. And you made it happen. And I think we're going to look back a few years from now and talk about the trajectory of this and talking about reflections and the tie back to like some of the troubleshooting we do in our buildings. It's amazing. And now I have a geeky question before we let Joe tell his story. Josh, what's your call sign?
KG7JK.
And is it your license plate?
No.
Okay. So you have half street cred there. Good job on the JK at the end.
My brother-in-law is a big shortwave guy. He's a moon bouncer. And his call sign is his license plate.
Mark Finstrom.
I thought about calling him to see if he wanted to come on the episode. Yeah. I did.
If Mark Finstrom is anywhere out there in the ether, in the cornfields, and the cow pasture, listening to us at some point on this episode, I think Mark Finstrom's license plate was his call sign also. Mark Finstrom, for those newer to ACPE and the Plugged In podcast, was a longtime ACPE member, former board member, and Hammy Ham.
So if you remember, two years before you were talking about Fox Hunt, we had as our keynote of the person who talked about the blockchain, if you remember her. She also was a ham radio enthusiast, even though she was from Europe and did these things and was an amazing worldwide speaker. Mr. Finstrom and I, Mark, we got to nerd out with her for a while too, to talk about all things radio, and that was pretty crazy. So first, let's start with Rachel. Put the book down. I sent you some links today. Just go and gut it out and just do the multiple guesses until you get them all right. And go to about 80%, 90% or so, because those are the questions. The questions are actually published, and they're kept the same questions for a series of years. So you'll know you're using the latest one because you'll be able to at least gut it out to get going. What I noticed is even though I was able to take the first test, and then I took the second one, and then the third one for the amateur extra, it's hard to know what any of that stuff means until you actually start using it. What's funny about the tests is there's nothing in there about operating a radio. So yes, it's nice to know the science. Yes, it's important to know the rules because there are some specific rules around amateur radio. But I think until I started pushing the buttons, I didn't know. The whole idea of like, why is 20 meters 1400 or 14,000? I don't understand 14. And then I got a 7 over here, and that's 40 meters. But why is it going the opposite direction? And they don't divide into each other. And so it's really making my brain hurt. And I didn't understand why this was. And then the higher the number, the shorter it goes, but the longer the thing, and the wave is up and down. And, how do you mean it's 40 meters high from the top of one down to the bottom back up? That's 40 meters long. And then the frequency, so all those things, they make sense later. But I would say just to get into ham radio, and you can buy a really inexpensive, I'm sure that we all have these, this Baofeng, this is about a 25 to 30, yeah, there it is. and you hear about it. So if you drop it in the mud or you destroy it or you lose it, it's 25 or $30 on Amazon, and it'll do all the things you need it to do to begin with. Eventually, when you move up, if you want to do into other areas of the spectrum, which then that's where the really interesting things happen. You don't have to get to the extra level. That was just me being competitive. And
If you want a moon bounce,
correct. Yeah. And it has to do with the amount of energy you can use and the spectra you can use. But you can get into something small also that can go on your desk, right? That can do all of the thing, hit all the bands that you need to hit. I liked it small because I was trying not to make a mess. Of course, the problem is it becomes a shopping tour because then you get something a little bit larger because then you got to have an ICOM. And now I have, 12 different brands and I have to rethink every time I sit down at the radio. I'm like, okay, wait a minute now. This is the Elecraft, means I got to do this, this, and this. And this one's the Yaesu and it does something different, right? But I would recommend, and I think I see Josh nodding his head, just gut it out. Take the in your car and just not while you're driving.
Yes, not when I'm driving.
Okay. Speaking of which, little side note, in 1930, it was 1928 that the Galvin brothers actually made this company. And then in 1930, when they made the ability to they made a car radio. He decided to change the name from Galvin Manufacturing to Motor for the car, and Ola, which means wave in Spanish. So that became Motorola. It's not a Japanese company. Motorola actually is sound in motion. Too bad Ryan's not here. I was going to tell him that story. That's where that came from. Yeah.
Gosh, that's a pretty perfect moment right there. Yes.
Right back to being a Spanish teacher. So,
yes.
But it is, I think, and I wrote this in the email earlier today, what I like. So what Josh was explaining is something that I have not done, but I've always been interested in doing. But I think that the range of things that you can do is what makes it exciting for nerds of all stripes. And I think the hardest part can be overwhelming. Like, well, I don't really like to talk to people on the radio. I talk to people all day long. So I don't do a lot of rag chewing is what they call it, just talking to folks. But I love what's called FT8, which is a digital mode, to see how far I can go with the least amount of energy, like electricity, with the craziest stupid antennas. Like in my apartment, I had this little wire that went up and around and it was resonant on 20 meters, which means it worked best on that. And I would just see how far I could go with 5 watts of electricity. And like, now and it changes, right? So it changes with the sunspots, it changes with the time of day, it changes with where it goes, the paths. And so it's really, you can be digital, all digital. You can do some software defined radio, which is, someday when I decide I want to spend a lot of money, I'll get a flex radio and it'll be all computer interface. And also you can be real nerdy and do the soldering. You can learn to bounce it off the moon, which is definitely an interesting thing. I walk around with something similar that Josh was showing before, the measuring tape thing connected to one of these little handy talkies, and try to bounce it off the International Space Station, see if I can get somebody to respond to me. Right, or off of the little satellites, the CubeSats they're called, and they're satellites that are about the size of a pomelo, like a really large grapefruit, but they're a cube. They're tiny, but they're up in the sky, and you can bounce off of that and talk to somebody in your neighborhood, but bouncing it off of that and over, and just the concept of bouncing radio signal off of the atmosphere and then landing it in Finland from your little apartment with a crappy antenna with 5 watts of power is super nerdy fun. Like, yes, I know we have the internet. Yes, I know we have cell phones, but your cell phone is actually using radio to connect to the tower, right? So this is not, we're using it all the time. You're always using radio.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll stop there for a second. Go ahead.
So when we hear about the incident earlier this week and the 100,000 SIM cards and trying to, disrupt network communications,
Mm-hmm.
and when we are following the geopolitical kind of international stage stuff and the jamming, all of the sound waves, things like that are, kind of all just sitting out here. Let's say if all of these weird things happen and our normal communication flow is disrupted for short term, medium term, what's HAM's role in that?
It's, I'll just say a couple words. I'll let Josh come back in. But this is, first of all, those nets are already practicing every week. There's a weekly net of different areas, different groups, and they practice, and they just do this all the time. When you're using like a SIM card, remember, you're using a radio to connect to a tower, but you're registering your device with a very specific number. And so those disruptions, because you're just back on the tech, you're back in the wire, you're back in the ground, you're going back through somebody's network, then somebody can be man in the middle, woman in the middle. All of those things are still existing. In some, you can do direct radio to radio. You can go through repeaters. The bigger the antenna, the more power you have, the further you can go. So if you're not a ham radio operator, you better get to know one, and then maybe you'll have water and freeze-dried food. But, all kidding aside is, it was actually, I had been toying around with it, and then it was during our Cascadia practice runs that I was like, I have to get a lot better at this really fast. Because I had my my first license, and then I'm like, all right, time out. Now I'm seeing like when this whole thing goes off the universe, if it ever does, in an earthquake or a flood, you're not going to be picking up your cell phone to call somebody because those aren't going to be working. So that's why, even finding these cheap radios and you throw them in your car. I mean, when I drive out to Eastern Oregon or even Central Oregon, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. I'm
We
just
are.
kidding.
We
But I
are.
always have I always have a radio in the car. I just have a radio in the car and I have one that I can charge on my they don't call them cigarette lighters anymore. They, in the power thingy.
Yes.
I'm old, so that's how I call them. But,
Yeah.
having that available and having some practice at it, it will be the way you communicate at some point in some emergency.
Josh, we are going to turn it back over to you, but I need to mark this moment for a second. And this is for our colleagues, Steve Langford, Don Wolf, and Stuart Long, among a few others, that when they hear this, I want them just to acknowledge that Joe's actually the one who said Cascadia subduction zone planning and training and exercising. Yes, it's usually me. It's become like the thing. So I hadn't actually, that's actually a really practical, right? A really practical thing that is maybe in our lifetime, and reason why I might want a handful of radios around as well.
Can I jump in real quick? Because I haven't said
Poor Josh.
this is just not my wheelhouse, but A, I was a geology major, so very hip to the Cascadia subduction zone and all that fun stuff. But B, we made a decision. I want to tie this back to schools a little bit and what our departments do.
Mhm.
And in our department a number of years ago, and I'm talking like 10 years ago, we were, when I got to Olympia 12 years ago, we were already licensing private FCC bands for our radios. That was already occurring. And we've continued to do that. And I believe we've actually had to give some back because they took some of those bands back. But we made a decision that our lowest common denominator for communications would always be radio, no matter what. And if you are familiar with Olympia at all, it is the very bottom of the Puget Sound, and that very bottom of the Puget Sound comes in on the Deschutes River. There are two Deschutes rivers, just so you know. And that Deschutes River is what the Olympia Brewery said that they got all their awesome water from. And there is a bridge over I-5, and there's two bridges through town. And if those bridges go down in a big earthquake, you cannot get from one side of the river to the other. Mm-hmm. Like, it stops. You're totally screwed. And our school district covers both halves. So if that goes down, all of our fiber goes across one bridge. That goes down. Our cell phone company, T-Mobile, says, oh, you have priority emergency communications, but everybody seems to have that. And if, in worst case scenario, it's all going down. So we made a big push to say that radio would be our lowest level of communication always. And we do radio tests every week or every 2 weeks between our buildings. And we have emergency radios that talk to all the buildings on a single channel. And then we have radios within our buildings that talk to each other. And we have 6 repeaters across our district that all of those buildings are on generators. And then our bus fleet actually was unable to maintain communication connection all the way out to some of our outlying schools and neighborhoods. So we put them on the Day Wireless Turbo West plan. So they're capable of getting radio signal in 5 states perpetually. And they're kind of on their... Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Did you grab the mobile that then we actually put mobiles in, like Oswego 2014? We put mobile, which is not the handy talkie, on the desks at every school that could then also had a car charger go bag as part of this. They could take it to their car and still communicate from the schools. We had the same thing. If there were the subduction, this is 2014, 15, like, oh, it looks like it's going to knock out the entire town because it goes over these weird little canals. Every school was going to be stranded. So each high school had to be a pod, but the radios were a part of that. And we also tested to make sure that some of them were going to have to go through repeaters. And we also wanted to not have to rely on repeaters. So we did some other things.
Right. And we've, all of our repeater stuff is kind of homebrew. And we had a couple of radio people in our department that just did it as a hobby. And they kind of took care of things, which in some ways was good and in some ways was bad because it wasn't necessarily the standard way of doing things. But we know that with some of those mobile base stations, we could drive to the top of a hill and we could get pretty decent coverage all the way across town and over the water. And that way we knew that we could at least talk to our schools, because in a situation like that, kids aren't leaving. They're going to be staying at school if it's that dramatic of a natural disaster. And, you know, that still is our philosophy, that when worst comes to worst, we have the radios and we will be able to communicate over those radios.
We'll show you the trick later about how you pull your antenna down, which is why you see military vehicles, they've got their antenna pulled all the way down because they're actually bouncing it up and over. So it's a whole other trick. We'll talk about this. Josh has got to get in here.
So Josh, Mark, we've been talking about the like what if and the Cascadia subduction zones, but you like use radios in your daily already without a major event. If I've been following along.
Well, I mean, the bus fleet, you know, the thing is we don't have a lot of cell phone coverage up here in the mountains. And so, for example, if you're just getting started, there's lots of events all over the place where it's running or biking or, you know, sending boats racing up the Snake River or something like that. In my case, it's the sled dog race. And the only way to do communications across the wilderness like that, there's no cell phone signal at all. So until Starlink started to come in, the only way to do that communication was over ham radio. So we have radios in all the buses. We have bases at each of the offices. I've got some battery boxes back there for a couple more places to put in. So those are the same radio that would be in the bus on a lithium iron phosphate battery pack. Yes. So for those who don't know, lithium iron phosphate's the new hip battery tech.
LifePo.
Oh my gosh, I feel like Mark, we're in like the
I have
insiders.
no idea what's happening.
We're in the
right now.
insiders club right now. I knew this was going to be the best episode.
Josh is probably, there it is. And I bet he's even got a solar charger for that because you've got an easy solar panel with a little, there it is. See, you got the nod.
So anyway, you get a lot more energy with a lot less weight and space than traditional lead acid and without all the hazards of the other lithium batteries.
And without the toxicity also of the recycling of those batteries. It's a whole other technology. It's pretty amazing.
So it's still kind of pricey, you know, because it's new and it charges different. So you can't just, you know, you need different chargers and things, but it's better and safer. And so I don't feel bad putting in a little plastic box under a secretary's desk in the front office. You know, I don't have to worry as much about that. So now they can.
And they come in smaller sizes too, right? So these are very portable. So this one powers this radio for about 4 days.
So my little suitcase radio ran 2 days before they realized it wasn't hooked up to the charger out at the sled dog race in a wall tent running ops 24/7 for days.
So are you saying that we should change our UPS systems over to this?
Only if you got bazillions of dollars. It's currently really high, but it is for MCOM stuff because the solar chargers are now so easily, it was harder to find them that were nice and portable. You got those fold out ones that you'll see, you know, in the hiking things, but they charge these very well. And again, different varying sizes. Yeah, they're a way to go.
Yeah, and going back to the emergency use of it all, the state emergency managers have a regular net, and for our event, we run a net. It's just controlled because only one person can be talking at a time on the radio. And so when they have regular hurricane nets, because all the cell phone towers go down, and so they have people in other areas listening because all the ham radio folks down in the south, they're used to this. They hop on and they place them through these organizations. There's nonprofits and all kinds of organization, and so there will be a person dispatched. Okay, you're now based with the Red Cross shelter. We're going to send you over here and you over there. And the radio guys go with their little suitcase and do their job, and they phone in like, we need this resource or we need that thing.
And you can see them practicing if you run road races, little 5K, 10K, whatever else. All those folks who are on the radio, they're usually your local ham club. And they're the ones, and they use that as a great way to practice because it is an event. There could be an emergency. They're in places where if you ever run hood to coast and you're out in Mist and Jewel where there's no connectivity at all, that's all run by your radio amateurs because it's the only way you can communicate that's out there.
Knowing how the waves work is really handy when you want to hook up like a football field just out of range of, you know, fiber.
So I do have an interesting historical story about this. I haven't shared
1974.
Everyone pull up a chair.
No, it was
It's story time with Mark.
1942.
Okay.
1943. I don't know if many people know this, but my grandparents were put in the Japanese internment camps. And my grandfather was sent to a specialty camp, a high security camp, because he was ham radio savvy. And because he had a lot of knowledge around how radios worked, they thought he was a security threat, and they pulled him out of Berkeley, of all places, and sent him to a camp. But somehow he met my grandma, who was at a different camp, and the rest is history. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting aside. I thought that was a nice little anecdote about how there's still a little bit of radio in my family, and how it was my grandfather in the 40s. You know,
when you think about, you've heard of people receiving radio through their fillings, right? Other random stuff like that. It's really the receiving part of it, especially. It's very simple. It's not a very highly technical. It is technical, but it's not. It's something that it's been around for all kinds of things. We were talking earlier about a gamma knife. That's just more intense waves, right? And then the less intense, you start up waves in the water, and then you go all the way up through, gamma and infrared, and it's all just along that spectra. So it's sort of an amazing thing. But being able to broadcast something simple, and I won't tell you cannot do this, but you can do a radio broadcast from your house on a little tiny oscillator chip that you plug into, possibly a Raspberry Pi. That probably shouldn't do that, but that is possible.
Is that covered in under your FCC license?
It is not, actually. No, you cannot. Well, it has to do with, you cannot broadcast and take over. That you're very limited in what spectra you can use, right? So, but people have been experimenting with this for a long time. That was the whole idea behind amateur radio, was to spread. If you think of it as the original crowdsourcing, like let's allow people to experiment and try different things, and then gather that knowledge. So that original crowdsource, like, oh, let's open up this little tiny area of the spectrum. When you look at the whole spectrum, it's not a very wide range, and so that's where the amateur part came in, and ham came from something else.
So Josh or Joe, I was going to ask that. Tell us how it became ham. School us.
Well, I didn't want to jump in. I've been talking a lot. I was going to let Josh tell the story. It's called carrier wave, but you probably know it as Morse code. And if you were somebody who was either really bad at it, or just they would call you ham-fisted.
There's an outfit that still makes radios you can build yourself, and they're designed to fit in different cans, like tuna cans, chicken cans, Altoid cans, what have you. They make little Morse code kits and things. And this is the kit that taught me that it could be fun to solder for a change as part of a group with other people, kind of like building a model or a Lego set or something. Only now you can power it up and like hear people and hear things and stuff like that. So,
and Josh, that looks if I had been thinking ahead, since I sit here in Newberg, Oregon this evening on this recording, if I had thought ahead, I would have brought my tuna can that looks very similar, the one that your team brought me at ACPE 2022.
So
yes.
I built the assembly stand for this to hold it still, and I'm like, that's a good size. I'll make my PCB the same size, and put all the LEDs there, because I've already 3D printed this little stand so that we could all learn how to solder, and everyone on my team built one of these little daughter boards, as it were. So there's a microcontroller on the back, and then this big old wafer's just a conduit for all the little LEDs we wanted to hook up to it.
And I still have mine. I think I had number 3 or number 4, whichever it would have been.
I built yours before I built mine.
So I have one of the very early ACPE custom builds, and I'm going to find time to be able to do this at ACPE. I have another question for you. And Mark, I want to touch on, when you talked about your grandparents in the internment camp. I mean, it's just a really dark chapter in our history. And speaking of radio and resistance, we think back through all of the cycles of these dark moments in history. And number one, I'm glad that your grandparents met and that we have a Mark Elliott here now with us.
There's a positive at least I hope it's positive, the outcome from that. But,
let's not push it.
Okay.
But I think about, how many of the stories of the resistance, right? In the kind of arc of history tend to usually end up being the positive outcomes of some of these phases that we end up in. And as radio came along, it was one of the ways they were able to compete with the actors with all of the big weapons and sophisticated systems. So on that more serious note, though, I think you can listen in to CB radio with your ham radio. Is that right? Or is that way wrong?
So I got my start in CB as a kid because the grown-ups were all, breaker. Back in the day, working at a scout camp, they used CB for their communication. It doesn't use the same frequencies. They're both radios, but, they talk on different areas of the spectrum. But they're close enough that there are some nearby that could be used on the other, but it's not proper nor legal to do so.
Okay. Proper being
So-
more important than legal to me in that context.
Well, as long as you operate within the power constraints of what you're allowed to do, that's legal. I think the statute of limitations is over now, but when I was a teenager, I was known for taking less than worthy vehicles up less than worthy logging roads to helicopter pads and mountains from SIO to LC to do what they call squashing on the CB. And it's where you try and your signal covers up the other person's signal and then you win. So we would do that, which is not proper either. But it was over 20 years ago, right? So Saturday nights at midnight, there was this group of fellas or people, and they would meet up. They would do mobile competitions. There would be almost like fox hunts, and then everyone would go to their spots and try and cover each other up. And there was a judge on some mountain on the other side of the valley. There'd be someone down in the Coburg Hills by Eugene, someone up in SIO, over, north of Corvallis, down by Philomath, So it was like this whole thing back in the late, I want to say. So I didn't think that was very cool, but when one of my guys told me, asked me how I got started, I started telling that story, and he was just like, that's so neat.
I think it's pretty cool. This goes way back for you. I could have been much more productive had I joined a squashing group instead of a cow tipping group.
Yeah.
Well, and it helped me land this job. When I went to school, I went through the Cisco Network Academy, and so I came here, and our whole network was wireless up here back in the day. There was nothing available. And so we've got a tower that we still maintain up at 7,000 feet. We've got microwave dishes and all this sort of stuff. And we've got some really crazy stories that we could tell. The fact that I knew how radio waves worked and I knew how to do networking. My superintendent was like, come on down.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Joe, you showed your tabletop units, the little couple of the radios. What do you
Yes.
do you just sit, what do you sit and listen into if you?
Well, so occasionally I'll put on, I like to listen to, they have got the nets, and every once in a while I will also, because you give your call sign, so they do kind of roll call. Sometimes they'll have a trivia one, or they'll have, something else. It's mostly just about practicing, because that's the only time I don't talk a lot. I prefer to do the FT8, which is the digital mode, which is essentially a call sign exchange, right? So you're saying, hey, anybody out there, here's my call sign. Hey, you, gotcha. Here's my call sign. Here's what your signal sounds like, or this the strength of your signal. Thanks. And that's it, right? So it's just basically an exchange of call signs. And most of that is just to see what radio propagation looks like. Of course, you're looking you've got your computer is pinging a server to tell it when you're making these contacts, and then you're tracking. So you can kind of see the different connections. So you can see pathways. If you look at the graphical representation, right now, for some reason on 30 meters, everybody's able to hit Finland in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., or they're able to hit the southern tip of Argentina, or right now, for some reason, I am getting Africa with 5 watts, which is bananas, right? And it is nerdy, and it's also very exciting. Additionally, with that nerdiness, if you do QSL cards, which are these actual postcards, there it is. You've got one. And I couldn't find one of mine. I've been packing as I'm moving, and they're kind of cool cards. And so I don't do them for everyone, but for some of those contacts that are really interesting, or if somebody sends one to me, I will send one back. Because it's the old days, you would always write down, here's your contact, because it was a lot less, because they was scanning through the thing. And now, you might make 20 or 30 or 50 contacts in a night. So, you might pick and choose and send those off. So I'll often do that more. And I have a radio that has more intellectual power, we'll say, just because I want to be able to use all the different bands, because if it's not working on 40 meters, it might work on 20 meters or 10 or 7. And sometimes you just don't know. And it has to do with the atmospheric conditions. Yeah. And what the last solar flare was, it screwed it all up. Yeah.
So go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to jump in that there's a lot of sub hobbies in the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that with a lot of hobbies, right? I can think of a bunch of hobbies where you start to get into it and some people gravitate to different activities that you can do in the hobby, right?
My brother-in-law, being one of those guys, is obsessed with solar radiation. He is he's always posting on Facebook. This is whatever, I can't remember what it's called.
Because it energizes the atmosphere.
And he always loves to say, there's a storm coming, maybe you'll see an aurora at this level. And he is just obsessed. That is a great point, that he's obsessed with like a subgenre of the radio thing that, he had his mother's rental house on the Oregon coast that had a rack in it, and all of his equipment was racked. I mean, he's very serious about it. Now they rent the house, so the rack's gone. But I do have a question that is related, not related. And this is something I have known about for a long time, and I'm curious if any of you listen to this, and I'm wondering if you can guess what it is. Does anybody listen to the UVB-76? That's the Russian military shortwave radio that just sends out buzzer beeps and then occasionally sends out like random code words.
Mm-hmm. So not anymore, but back in the day, my grandfather had one of those kind of old school shortwave radio receivers. I think it was made by Zenith or something, and it had like 40,000 things. You could never figure that out, but you could actually hit those if it was the right time and you were random and lucky. But people still do track them all the time and post what's happening and what the state of repair is on the device and all that things. If you ever watched The Americans, they actually did a mobile one. They always had it in his car, and it was doing all that kind of stuff. He was just using regular amateur radio.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop a movie, All the Light You Cannot See, with Hugh Laurie. It's set in World War II, and it's all about radio, listening to the radio. Then the war happens, and running broadcasts, and the beauty of humanity, and also the horror of it. It was pretty good. Lots
That's
of radio
recent, right? It's fairly recent, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about it. People love it. I just wrote it down. It's on my list. Right after Alien Earth.
Right after you go from your beginning license, you're going to go to general. That way you can get your call sign that you would like. Or if you go to extra, then you can get even fewer letters. You want to make it really short and do it super cool.
So let me ask a practical question. So it's Wednesday, September 24th, as we're recording this, and we all work not 8 to 5 jobs generally. Can I knock out using Joe's method and not being like Pollyanna and actually reading the material and learning the material? Because I would rather be able to do it and then learn. Can I come to ACPE ready for this in May?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would hold a big test session for the sled dog race, and so I would get people study resources and say just flashcard the app, and then we'll do questions, and they would get their license just before the race. And I've seen some people do it in as little as 24 to 72 hours of like flashcarding it, just muscle memory.
Yep.
But then right after they get the license, within a week or two, they're out on the trail, and we're like, okay, so here's how it works. You're going to, say this and that, and by this time they've got their call sign, so they get to spend a couple days just relaying some information back and forth with their handheld to kind of solidify it.
So what you're saying, Josh, is that we're going to go ahead and hold a testing session at ACPE for people to get their license.
Well, they've made it all electronic now, testing. And so everything's a little bit different. I have not gone through that process yet, but I am a VE, and I bet you many others in the audience are a VE, which means we can test people. It's just another thing you sign up to. I will be careful and follow all the rules.
Not tell them all the answers.
Yeah, right. You can't test your relatives. You're not going to let them cheat. You're going to, but I haven't gone through the electronic process yet for testing, so I don't know how that looks like.
So the testing part, now that it's electronic, I'm assuming means like online. Okay. So now what I would be curious, as somebody who has been sitting on this book almost literally, because it's kind of underneath my big red chair, for those who remember the big red chair during the pandemic, I'm kind of concerned on that. You touched earlier, Josh, on the idea of proper versus legal, and the legal stuff, like, we get figured out. But I think my thing that I'm more nervous about is really like violating the code of conduct for how, like, the responsibility once you have the radio and a call sign. So what I wonder about is not necessarily the testing, but if we had a safe space for like the Rachels of ACPE, we did our testing, and realistically for me it would likely be in January or February or March, and so I'd be still very green and learning some of those, like, here are the rules of the road, and here's the kind of proper part. Not that I've ever been totally proper, but I also want to respect the community and the way you do things. So I would wonder about, for those of us who are interested in, and maybe one of the calls to action or the invitations is, hey, if you're thinking about this, take the Joe approved method of, or the Josh flashcarding it approved method of getting your license, and then a couple stolen hours on a couple of afternoons there at Skamania is where we can tell you everything you're doing wrong, and how to tongue in cheek actually like fit in with a ham community when you go back home.
Yeah. Well, and I only tell you that method for your initial test because the next two are much more difficult. The extra, I actually did. It took me several months of like being very, this is what I'm going to read myself to sleep with, because it's a lot higher level of scientific stuff,
Sure.
I would say, because you kind of know the rules, like stay here, do this, so that's fine. But I do think that there are rules of the community, and sometimes, and I would consider myself still very new to it, even though I've been doing it for several years, just because I'll get into one of these worldwide contests and they've got rules in the contest about how they're going to exchange. And then some people truncate the rules, even though that's within the rules. I'm like, crap, what now? What am I supposed to send? So I'll sit and listen sometimes for an hour and try to get the pattern. Okay, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And then I'll practice like in my head. I'll write it on paper because I feel still like I'm not going to just jump in and do this thing because I'm trying to get points and I don't want to screw up somebody else's points because they're giving you what number you are in their, they're numbering the number of contacts they make. So yeah, there's a lot of just learning the rules of the road well beyond just getting the license.
Yeah. And I think like probably all four of us and most of ACPE, I learn by doing. Like, and I'm actually a book learner. I love well-written instructions and how to do things. But then it's really when you first code your application or when you first do your database and then break it, that's where we learn a lot. So I like the approach of, if I heard you correctly, checking for understanding. I should fast pass through the just getting the license so I can actually learn by doing. And then learn by doing is when I move up the next two levels.
Just some of that stuff will help you when you get to that start studying. Like for my general, which is the second level, I ended up getting a book that was great. And I couldn't find it today, but it had both I've forgotten the initial one. It's just
Gordon West's books, because they had an audio CD, which I just ripped to MP3. But when they talk about something, he has an audio clip with an example of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really handy. It's like someone can talk about picket fencing. Picket fencing, what is that? Well, if you hear picket fencing, what's that supposed to mean?
It's one of the best basketball plays in the history of basketball. But other than that, keep going.
But if you're going by a picket fence and your sound was bouncing off of it, think of driving by in a car, the windows down, right? It's baffling on and off. And he has an example of what that sounds like on the radio, right? So those were all great books. I don't know if he's still doing the new versions or whatnot.
Yeah, actually, a link I sent earlier today has his for the amateur extra. But when I was studying for the general, now that I'd been doing a little bit of radio, I actually went back and did the study guide, even though I didn't need it for that initial level. And then the general made more sense. And then the next book I got for amateur extra it had lots of general. I have several chapters on review of the general.
And you don't need to know Morse for any of those levels. You don't have to do at so many words per minute anymore.
Yeah, that was a big barrier.
It was.
Folks.
I didn't. Yeah. Okay. That would.
You don't need to know Morse.
I could actually revive some of that easier than maybe some of the other stuff, but.
Well, you had to do it at 15 words a minute. I think you had to be able to read or listen. They call it reading, even though it's not. It's not a visual.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but there's contesting, there's collecting states, there's summits on the air where you're trying to earn points in a competition to activate summits or parks on the air, or they do de-expeditions where like people will hop on a boat and go to some random island somewhere just to activate the island and do all the contacts and stuff. I mean, you'd be playing an expert on a podcast, but there's far too many rabbit holes to go down for me to be able to, tell you all about it.
Yeah.
And for an electronics hobby, I think that's what makes it great is that there are so many avenues. You don't like for me, I don't like talking after I've been talking all day. So I want to do something else. But there's a total huge space for that. And if you're a big adventure person, you like to hike, there's a space for that. I think it's just it's nice. It's a full range of nerds and everybody's got their space.
So Joe, you just touched on one of my questions. Is ham ever used as a people sitting and podcasting, essentially, like having a ham radio conversation that people are listening in on? Or is it really meant to be used for short, transactional, functional relays of messages?
People will sit there and chew the fat forever, all
Okay.
night long if they want to. They
Okay.
go, they meet on a particular frequency and they say, hey, you want to carry on? And they'll go somewhere else where that's empty, and then they'll carry on their conversation as long as they want to. So there is the very practical side of I'm sending emergency messages or packets and emails, right, over HF, right, for very specific needed practical things. And then there's people just, reaching out and enjoying, especially folks who are limited in other ways too, right? A lot of people come into the hobby later in life when they have a little more time, or resources, or maybe they can't do some of the other things they used to be able to do, right? And so reaching out and making a friend. I know this one guy from Germany who comes to our area all the time, and whenever I hear him key up, hey, how's it going, and he's got friends here that whenever he comes to visit, he meets them on the radio and they know he's coming, and it's a thing.
Oh my gosh.
And English is the international radio language.
Oh, I did not know that.
So even if you don't know other languages, that's all right. Some of them may be speaking broken English with you because that's the most common international language.
And then you can learn things like Kilo, Zero, Lima, Romeo, Mike, and you'll know who you're talking to.
By the time we meet for the next episode on ham radio, my brain will slow that whole down. Zero radio.
That's Kilo.
Kilo,
so Kilo
Kilo.
is for K, right?
Yep.
And then Zero.
Zero.
Yeah. And then Lima.
Lima. Yep.
Romeo.
Romeo.
And Mike.
Mike. Okay. Thank you.
Foreign language to me.
That's my call sign. It's basically Morelock spelled backwards. So if you look at it that way.
See,
Now
I just
I get it.
put my initials on the end,
The JK.
Yeah, no, I like the JK.
JK.
That's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's really good.
One thing people do is they surf the gray line, which is where the night and day line on the globe is at that point in time. It's going from light to dark. And so propagation will do funny little things along there. And there's a whole network of small little things running Whisper that are beacons so that you can go online, look at a map, and see where all those little tunnels are at any given time. Yeah. And a lot of people, they wait for dusk, just going into dusk, and try and make all their contacts just as the light's failing, trying to ride that line.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing. I'm glad you brought that up, Josh. And this is a super nerdy thing with the gray line, but that's where I've made all of the most incredible contacts, far further distances by thousands of miles of difference, just by being at the right time of the day, often by accident, because I get home from work, I'm sitting around, like I start doing this, and then you've got all these things coming from all over the planet, and then they're gone. Like you got them, and then they're just gone. It's pretty magic to watch it happen.
So one of my favorite words in the English language is liminal. And the liminal space, right, Liminal, is exactly, I think, that gray line idea. It is that in between. And I actually talk about it a lot in terms of like human change and the uncertainty time versus when there's some certainty, even if it's bad things or, versus good things. And so I love that of the gray line and that liminal space, right, as the light is turning to dark or dark to light. So this has been amazing. I want to talk for another hour at least, but I have a question for each of you to maybe start winding us down. Is there one moment that you're like, if I had 1 minute to tell future generations or to put in a time capsule, there was this time that I turned on the radio and it's either a place that you were able to connect with, it was like a moment that you stumbled into. Is there like one that rises above the others in all of the times that you've been coming home from work and I'm just going to kind of sit and radio for a while?
Well, I'll start with something short. Unlike Josh, I didn't come into it until much later. So about 2015. But I had a block of wood that I would carry around on my bike that I had colored with knobs on it because I had read about radio that could go across the world. Now, this is obviously pre-internet. We're talking about 1975, right? And so I thought, and I remembered thinking how magical that would be that I could be on my bicycle and I could use this device to communicate to the world. So I had that concept. I wish I have the bike. I don't have the block of wood, but I remember that. And so my first time that I made other contacts, but somehow I got into a contest that I should have no business in because I didn't know what was happening. But I made the contact correctly, and I got a number back from the person. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, this is all right. This is cool. Wow, I didn't screw that up badly. I was so nervous I was going to screw, because this, you could tell who was a pro. But I think that distance from a kid in 75 to, 2015, I'm like, okay, wow, that was a crazy journey. And so I remember that really has turned me on to the whole thing of like, I have to get better at this so I can actually make points, because then you get your scorecard back and you got 3 contacts. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get more than 3 next time. I wasn't last. But.
And while Josh still looks like he has his thinking face on, what that touches on is that nervousness that I feel about this, Joe.
Yeah.
Right? That you already passed through like 10 years ago. I think that's when we were actually all talking about this kind of.
I still get nervous. I still get nervous in the contest, especially because there are people who are really, like Josh said earlier, there are the gurus. I mean, we sound like we know a lot. We know more than the 2 of you, but there's
that doesn't take
combined.
Now, it sounds great, but there are these people who are just so good at it. And so I still get nervous in a contest. I don't want to screw it up for their score. Right. So I'm more worried about that than my own.
Okay, Josh, was there a moment where you were like,
Well, for me, I mean, I think Jeff, worldwide comms is where the magic is, and it's really cool. And I haven't had the time to do a lot of that. And so for me, like the most fulfilling thing has been volunteering at the sled dog race, because this nerdy thing is affecting lives, keeping people safe, And so when we've had times when search and rescue is dispatched, and I'm running the checkpoint and I've got to leave. So my son was volunteering, he got his license, and I'm like, okay, you have the checkpoint. I'm going to with SAR, and making all of that turn out right and being able to help in all of that, and my son being able to carry his portion of the job, at his age, was very rewarding. Right. So that would probably be my it's not the craziest story, but it's the one that warms my heart the most.
That's what yep. That's what I was hoping for. And Josh, for those who don't live in places like we live, SAR is search and rescue, folks, right? And it's a very real part of life out in the mountains and the forests. I'm assuming on the Coast Range as well, but definitely in Central and Eastern Oregon. It's a big responsibility, usually volunteer mostly, and a lot of radio.
And we're hoping to maybe have a couple new and different things at the conference this year.
Yes.
And if there's interest in a session of some kind, I'm sure I'm not the only one that would be happy to put something together. And we have lots of ways of communicating that amongst the group between the email serve. And I try and monitor the Discord. Mm-hmm. Not everyone in the team can be watching all the things, so it's my duty to watch and pass along the things for the different guys, like you might find that useful and whatnot. So you can always hit me up on the Discord.
Wonderful. Any closing thoughts? We've taken a lot of your evening already.
Just figure out when your test date is so we can celebrate when you get your license.
Yes, I will.
Well, and last year, David set up an antenna and was doing contacts out on the lawn.
I saw that.
I wish I had known that he was doing it. I would have gone down, said hi, and checked it all out. So
yeah, we can bring a bunch of equipment and just do some of those for fun, different kinds of antennas.
Not my skill set, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think David wins every fox hunt, right? And then you have to start it over so other people have a chance.
Challenge.
Yes.
So I'm working on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how this grows. Yes. And again, shout out to David Lloyd at Edmonds, because the enthusiasm, I think, has grown. Josh, you got us started. David was like the first follower. That first follower is where the change starts happening. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Thanks for
having us.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Thanks for spending an evening with us.
All
Josh, right. Joe, thank you very much.
Bye.
That is a topic I am so uncomfortable and unfamiliar with.
That's what this should all be about. This is like our own free learning channel.
No,
why
I
we're
don't
doing
disagree.
This.
Well, what do we got left tonight?
Well, so Journey. Do we just want to go? Do we want to like sing Journey as you're saying your catch line, or do we want to just overlay Journey later? Let's just overlay.
I mean,
let's
just not stop believing. It's gonna be great. But what a wonderful episode. Thank you, Rachel, for planning this one. This was all you. Again, it's a very foreign topic and subject to me, but it does have, it hits home a little bit. You know, again, my brother-in-law is very into radios, and it even has that familial historical piece for me in that my grandfather was in the internment camps and had to deal with the fact that he was knowledgeable with this stuff. So he got stuck in a high security camp. A lot of history there. I think to draw this back for our non-radio aficionado district people, you do need to think about what your lowest level of communication is going to be in your school district in the case of a disaster. Like, that is a thing you really do need to think about. And, you know, how do you prepare for one of those disasters? And do you do radio drills? And do you even use radios or so?
Yeah.
Anyway, it is late.
It
And
is.
with that, I do think it's time to unplug.